What is up, everybody? Welcome on into week 2 of the Warchant Report powered by Cummins. Use that promo code TAILGATE, TAILG, numeral 8 to save 10% off at shop.cummins.com, including many of their own line of products, including the portable power stations, the portable generators, standby generators, RV generators. First home game, everybody. You don't want to be without power. Use the promo code TAILGATE. Go over to shop.cummins.com. Joined by Director of Original Content, Tom Lang, also Executive Producer of The Jeff Cameron Show, and lead/senior writer Corey Clark, which doesn't really tell the tale about just how important and vital Corey Clark is to the overall operations over at warchant.com. But subscribe to the website, subscribe to our YouTube channel. It is certainly worth it. And join us on game day, pregame, 5 o'clock, doors open at Hotel Indigo in College Town. 5:30 pregame show goes down with Jeff Cameron and Tom Lane getting you ready for Florida State taking on the Southern Miss Golden Eagles. We'll get a little bit of a breakdown later on the program, but let's focus right now, gentlemen, on Florida State and what just happened here a week ago now, but we're still basking in the afterglow of this, Corey. But talking about Florida State throughout the preseason, you, myself, Tom, Jeff, everybody associated with Warchant, Ira, we forecasted a really good football team, maybe even a great football team, possibly. But there was, worries about maybe giving too much of expectations, setting too high of a ceiling, win another 10 games, make it to Charlotte, not necessarily the ceiling, but that would be a good barometer. Has things changed at all? Have things changed at all for you after seeing the way Florida State dismantled the number 5 team in the country last weekend over in Orlando?
Yeah, not only that, and we'll touch on it later, but also what happened with the other teams on their schedule might have changed my outlook on the season and what should be. When you go and beat, I think LSU's a good team. They're clearly overranked a little bit. They're probably not a great team, but they're a good team. And when you go on a 31-0 run and completely dominate them and look, quite frankly, like the best team in the country on the first weekend, yeah, I think that changes things a little bit. If they stay healthy, I don't think there's any reason they shouldn't be an 11-win team at worst, quite honestly. I mean, they'll be favored in every game they play from here on out, in my opinion. So if they're going to be the favorite in every game, they might have a slip-up. They might not play well. But the beauty from what I saw on Sunday night, Tom, and I think you'll agree with this, as on you're running the show, I know, but they didn't play well. They didn't play incredibly well in that game. The first half, that wasn't a great performance by them, and they still beat the number 5 team in the country by 21 points, even though that wasn't an A-plus effort. Meaning, they can play kind of poorly for a lot of parts on this, and I don't think they will, but if they play poorly in 4 or 5 other games, they can still win them. And if they play great, they're beating everyone. That's what I got from Sunday night.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd say before the season, I was a playoff or bust guy for 2 reasons. Number one, this is such a veteran roster, and we saw what they were last year. So there's a lot of comps for spring camp and fall camp. We know what we're looking at because this was a team that won 10 games last year. Most everybody that was important comes back, and that only is fortified now with what I saw this weekend. And Corey, 100%, I agree. When I picked a 17-point win last week against LSU, it wasn't because I thought Florida State would look like rubbish for parts of the first half. And they did. And yet, with that first half, they won by more points than I thought they would win by. So, yes, if they put together 20 good minutes of football out of 60 each week, you like their chances. They're probably operating at an 80 or 90% chance to win the football game. They're going to clean that up. This team is dangerous. This team has gone from, in my mind, a team that can go to the playoff, which is what I thought the success barometer was, to one I think can now win the national championship. Does it mean they're going to? No. I just wasn't sure if they were capable of doing that.
That's their ceiling now. Yeah.
I absolutely believe they are capable of doing that now. Yeah.
Maybe some of the expectations have changed, as Corey mentioned, about what happened in the snake pit that is Wallace Wade Stadium up in Durham, North Carolina on Monday. Clemson, obviously the standard bearer of things here in the ACC of late, fell to Duke, and not a close game at all. But simply the fact that now makes perhaps a path of least resistance for Florida State might be a good thing on the surface, it seems like, Corey, but also doesn't that necessarily possibly narrow the margin of error Florida State has now if Clemson is not this top 10 power that they've been here perennially?
It gives you decade? It does, but I think it does narrow it in the sense that it gives you less chances for a marquee win if Clemson turns out to be 6-6 and you don't face them again in Charlotte. But maybe Duke, and I know we can roll our eyes, maybe Duke becomes more of a marquee win later on in the season. That's certainly a tougher game than you thought it was 5 days ago or 7 days ago. So I think that it opens up the possibilities of an undefeated season more, because you see that Clemson is clearly beatable. And I know it's a tougher deal in Death Valley, but they're clearly beatable. You're clearly better than Clemson. Clemson's not as bad as they looked on Monday night, but you're still better than them. So that's nice to know. But yeah, if you have a slip up, whether it's to Clemson or somebody else, and then you don't get the ability to make up for that slip up by beating a top 7 or 8 team in Charlotte, that could hurt your chances to make the playoffs when it's all said and done, even if you win the ACC.
Net positive, net negative, you think, Tom, with Clemson losing and Duke and that opening maybe a path for Florida State of least resistance to make it to Charlotte and a playoff potentially?
Yeah, I think it's a net negative because the committee won't be wise to Duke's improvements as much as maybe somebody in the ACC footprint would. I think that the brand of Clemson is obviously the one that's going to stand out stronger. But I do think if Florida State takes care of business here and goes to Charlotte, they could be facing an opponent at that point. I know the question's about the 12 games, but that 13th one could be against a North Carolina team that looked very impressive against South Carolina and might be squarely in the top 15 at that point. Yeah. So, we've been talking all preseason long about, with no divisions, could Florida State play Clemson twice? Is that the likelihood? And we thought maybe it was. But even if that's not the case this time around, if you get a matchup against a North Carolina team that has one loss or fewer, then you've got all the resume you need. If you go 12-0 before that game and say Carolina's undefeated or has one loss, you might be talking about a freebie, but there's a long way to go between now and then.
But don't you think also, guys, it'll have a lot to do with what LSU does this year. If LSU finishes 10-2 and you beat them by 21 points, well, that's going to be a huge feather in the cap. Yeah. If they go 7-5 and kind of fall off a cliff or a little bit, then that win obviously isn't going to be as impressive as it is right now.
Yeah, I mean, here my thing is, I just thought that you didn't have to go undefeated to make it to the playoff a week ago. But seeing the way that Clemson looked, and to Tom's point about probably the playoff committee not factoring in, maybe Duke's prowess and doing this more along the lines of, Clemson's down and they're not good any longer. Like, it really seems like you do have to go undefeated. But it's that much more manageable now that you know that Clemson's not a juggernaut. Because correct me if I'm wrong, but those Trevor Lawrence teams, I know Deshaun's teams would lose to Syracuse. They lost to Pitt one year at home, but they still made the playoff. But those Trevor Lawrence teams of late, where the ACC was quite down, those teams went undefeated, if I'm not mistaken, right, to make it to the playoff. So it feels like that's going to have to be the path for Florida State.
I think so, but they did prove that they could, and those weren't great ACC seasons. They proved they could get in with a one loss. It just depends. Again, I think if LSU has a really good season and you beat the bejesus out of them, but you have a slip up at Pitt in November and lose by 3 points, but still then win the rest of your games and win your conference, you'll at least be in the conversation. And I think probably on the right side of the conversation, depending on how things break. A lot of it will be determined by how good Clemson ends up being, if they're good at all, and how good LSU ends up being.
One note I'd add real quick at the end, the committee and human beings love stars, and you've got one in Jordan Travis, and that's going to carry some weight too. I know it shouldn't, but the way the committee goes, if you've got a Heisman candidate or a Heisman front runner down the stretch and Florida State has one loss in an ACC championship, people are going to want to see that star, and I think that factors into the room whether they want to admit it or not.
Playoffs, national championship aspirations, Heisman candidates. Maybe getting a little ahead of our skis. We got Southern Miss coming to town. Home opener. We'll break down the Golden Eagles right after this on the Warchant Report, powered by Cummins.
Whether the power is out or you're out of pocket, be the hero with portable power from Cummins, a global power leader. Own-in power stations, perfect for mobile lifestyles, small and compact. Cummins own-in power stations provide temporary, off-the-grid power. Use it to charge your mobile devices, power your TV for the tailgate, run a fan to cool the party, or light up the after-dark celebration. Cummins offers power stations from 100 to 1,000 watts. These can be very handy during those temporary thunderstorm power outages we often get in the southeast in the afternoons. Use the promo code TAILGATE, TAILG, numeral 8, for a 10% discount at shop.cummins.com.
Welcome back on into the Warchant Report, powered by Cummins. Aslan Hudjavani, joined here by Corey Clark and Tom Lang. We're all at warchant.com. Hit that thumbs up, subscribe to the website and the YouTube page. We certainly would appreciate it. Interesting matchup here for Florida State in week 2, coming off a huge game, huge win over LSU. They take on Southern Miss. Ties that bind, though, these two programs. Head coach Will Hall was an assistant coach for Mike Norvell. One of the assistants for Will Hall was an assistant for Mike Norvell as well. Also, the new defensive coordinator for Southern Miss was a quality control analyst over at Georgia when Dan Lanning was there. Dan Lanning, Mike Norvell, connect all the dots. Lots to keep up with. Our own Matt LaSerre, though, caught up with Jeff Haeger over in Mississippi to give us a breakdown of the Southern Miss Golden Eagles.
We're getting ready to get to this next game with USM. Let's start by taking a look at their offense. The first part is obviously Frank Gore Jr.
Yeah, he's dynamite, and you guys, I'm sure, saw what he did in the bowl game. He set, Southern Miss record, FBS bowl game record, going over 300 yards there in Mobile against Rice in that bowl game. So he was a guy that also last week wasn't quite used, as if it was going to be a full-length game. I mean, he kind of came in here and there, but they gave some other guys some run, and he still scored 2 touchdowns. But he really is just one of those game breakers. He's not quite as big as his dad was, but man, he when you get him in the open field, he is really hard to tackle. You see people getting the ball in different ways. I mean, one of the first times Gore touched the ball, I think, was kind of on a jet sweep, and so it doesn't seem like there's a cookie cutter formula as to how they want to get these guys the ball. And then, just when I thought Frank Gore had kind of maybe played his last down because the game was out of hand, they bring him in for a crucial 4th down, to try to keep the drive going, and they just do the superback formation that they had to do a couple of years ago. So there's a lot of different ways this team can hurt you.
And then what other pieces of this offense are you kind of excited to see go out there this weekend?
Yeah, so I mean, and obviously you see what the transfer portal can do. They got the Clemson transfer, Billy Wiles at quarterback. He looked good in week 1, and then a couple weapons on the outside, Jacarius Caston. I hate to keep going back to this bowl game, but I mean, he made a couple big plays there and has taken that momentum into this season. So I think it was the first drive of the game. They just threw kind of a quick bubble screen to him if you could, and then he just made one move and took it down the sideline and did the rest himself. I really just want to see the whole thing come together, because throughout the offseason, Coach Hall was saying that he can finally run the offense, his offense, that he's been wanting to run, and now he finally has the pieces in place to do it. Southern Miss has weapons, so I'm excited to see what that looks like. Now, whether or not it'll look great against a team as talented as Florida State, I mean, obviously that's a big hill to climb, but I think you'll certainly probably see some more packages, more wrinkles in this game than you would have in week 1 against Alcorn State.
Now to move on to the defense, the name that stood out to me the most there was safety Jay Stanley, who's a former Ole Miss Rebel there. He had 2 interceptions just in the first quarter.
Yeah, and one of those, I mean, I actually didn't get a great view at that first one because it was on the same sideline as me, but that one everybody kind of thought was out, and then it's like, oh man, they reviewed it. He was in bounds, and he was one of Coach Hall's 2 representatives at Sunbelt Media Days, so a guy that obviously handles his business on and off the field. But you saw the talent. I mean, that second pick, he came out of nowhere and dives to get it. So he's one of those guys. You look back at the film last year, and there's a lot of new names in that secondary, and some of the questions this week were even kind of targeted, or last week I should say, just kind of about the inexperience in the secondary. But that just goes to show you, I mean, if Jay Stanley's leading the way, I mean, we may not be too far behind the 8 ball in that department.
Thanks again to Matt and Jeff for that. So, gentlemen, let's focus now on some matchups possibly here, but mainly it's Florida State versus themselves, it feels like. So, Corey, on Saturday, do you think it's more important for Florida State to continue to develop this refined passing game that we saw throughout the preseason and the second half against LSU, or is this time to get the running game back on track for the Seminoles?
Oh, no, I don't know that they go into any game saying we're going to do this or that. I think what needs to happen is they need to keep going down the field and scoring a lot of points. They come into this game having scored on 6 straight possessions. They finished that game off better than you could have ever imagined, with 5 touchdowns and a field goal in 6 possessions. So keep that going, man. Like, there's, as we've talked about and we'll continue to talk about, there's not much you can do to really stop this offense as it's currently constructed and healthy. So I would assume you're going to be able to run the ball, because I assume Southern Miss is going to be scared to death of those wide receivers, and they're going to back everybody way off. So you should be able to run the ball. So yeah, go do that, but just go do what you've been doing. Take what they give you. I mean, they're very good at that. Norvell is an elite play caller, and he's got an elite dude at quarterback. By the way, real quick before we get into it, Patrick Surtain, Southern Miss grad. There's another connection there. Yeah. So anyway, go ahead, Tom, or Aslan. Sorry.
Tom, do you want to see Keon Coleman score 3 more touchdowns again, or do you want to see Trey Benson rip off close to 200 yards running?
Either's really pretty to watch, but I think if they had their druthers, the coaching staff would like to see the latter. Trey Benson had his moments last week, but you could tell he's still trying to internalize the changes to his game at full game speed. Coach Yak said in the offseason he wants to see a more decisive Trey Benson. There were moments, you saw that on Sunday, and it looked perfect. And then there were others where Jordan Travis is yelling at him. Corey, you pointed it out on Wake Up Warchant, the reaction show, that, Jordan gets mad and says, my man, don't bounce it. You've got something right here. And then Rodney Hill comes in and Lawrence Toafili comes in, and maybe in some instances they run more consistently than Trey did. So long way of saying I think the running game is the one, if they could pick, they would want to succeed with. It shortens the game, gets you out of Dodge in a short week in which your bodies are sore. And then also just looking at Southern Miss's previous opponent. Yep, that's right, I did. Alcorn State. Alcorn rushed for over 180 yards in that game. So if Alcorn can do that, I would think that Florida State can run for a big total if they wish to do so. But if they stack the line, then what the hell? You throw to Keon Coleman and you might have 3 more, just like you said.
And we should point out, a lot of people think this is a gimme, and I know the point spread would say that. But Southern Miss is a bowl team. They went to a bowl last year and won a bowl. They are outmanned. But this is a better team. I know Florida State is much better than they were 2 years ago. It's a much better team than Jacksonville State, who Florida State played in a similar circumstance on a short week 2 years ago. So again, it is Southern Miss would beat that Jacksonville State team by 3 touchdowns. Of course, this Florida State team would beat that Florida State team by 5 touchdowns. But still, I want to see them play well. You know what I mean? Just don't go through the motions a little bit. That's what Norvell preaches. That's what you think this culture has become. So, but it is a bit more of a test than people are giving credit for, because Southern Miss is a real program that just went to a bowl. It's not a Division II school, and it's not a 1AA or whatever FCS school. Sorry.
Yeah. Corey, I mean, you mentioned one game, one victory, change your outlook, recalibrated expectations. I don't think this one game will have as much cachet, obviously, but if Keon Coleman were to go out there and have another tremendous game, a month ago we were asked on the podcast, it's 4th and goal. You only got 1 shot left, obviously. Who are you throwing the ball to? And, we both said Johnny Wilson. Would another monster game from Keon Coleman, even against an opponent that's Sun Belt caliber, would that change who you think the number one go-to target is for this offense?
Oh, I think that's already changed. I don't think what happens on Saturday night changes that for me. It's Keon. Johnny is I don't know how else to say it. He is a force in wide receiver. He is an absolute college football force. He's the second best wide receiver on this football team. There's no other way to say it. They're both matchup nightmares. So I think your number one is Keon. But I mean, what's crazy about Johnny is it just seems like he's always open. And some of that is scheme, but not all of it. Like, he is a big dude that moves in an elite, like he moves like a 6'2" guy. And that's kind of underappreciated with him because of the size. But man, as good as he is and as big of a matchup nightmare as he is, I think you have, I don't know, man, you have one of the 2 or 3 best wide receivers in the country on the other side of him. So yeah, I think Keon's moved up to 1 and Johnny's 1A.
Defensively for Florida State, Tom, do you want to just see Florida State absolutely lock things down when it comes to their running defense, or is it just more about limiting big plays and just keeping Southern Miss out of the end zone?
I think for Adam Fuller, it's about making sure their eyes are in the right place. I mean, we talked to him on Wednesday after practice. You were right there, Aslan, and he was talking about how first play, their eyes are in the wrong spot at linebacker, and it's a big play that goes behind them, but he liked the response. Other times they had breakdowns about where their eyes were and some basic keys. So I know it's going to sound kind of like a bland, but I think that's what the coaching staff wants to see this weekend is when they grade the film, they didn't make as many mental mistakes or eye discipline mistakes. The other thing that they're going to want to see from the defense too is can you tamp down a little bit on the post-whistle flags and moments of playing out of control? I think this is one of those weekends where they're just looking for discipline and allow your athletes to take over at that point. I think the thing that you're going to see, you saw it against LSU, so why wouldn't you against Southern Miss? But a heavy rotation of bodies up front for the defensive line to keep guys fresh. And then you might see more of a rotation in from some of those members of the secondary. For example, Ashlyn Barker played 9 snaps according to Pro Football Focus last week. I would imagine that count would go up. I think they want to rotate guys and get them more exposure and then just look to see that when they grade the film, there's not as many mistakes where they go, what the hell were you looking at?
All right, then. One thing left to do. That's make game predictions. That's next here on the Warchant.com report, powered by Cummins. Check out the mobile power solutions from Cummins, a global power technology leader. Own-in portable generators are versatile portable generators for your everyday or on-the-go power requirements. Choose a model to power your lifestyle, from working on a DIY construction project, tailgating from your pickup truck, or powering your critical home appliances during Florida hurricane season and power outages. Cummins offers own-in portable generators from 2,500 to 9,500 watts.
Use promo code TAILGATE, that's TAILG, numeral 8, for a 10% discount on a P2500i at shop.cummins.com. The P2500i can power you for 10 hours on only 1 gallon of fuel, and its double insulated housing keeps you humming at a peaceful 52 decibels. Get it again for 10% off using the promo code TAILGATE at shop.cummins.com.
Welcome back on into the Warchant Report powered by Cummins. Use that promo code TAILGATE, TAILG, numeral 8, to save 10% off this PS1000 and several models of the Cummins own-in portable power stations. These things are going to be great for a tailgate. You can charge everything: televisions, fans, lights, mobile devices. There's different models with different wattages that can fit to your needs. Also, standby generators and portable generators for the ultimate tailgating experience. If you're not going to join us at Hotel Indigo for the pregame show from 5 o'clock, the doors open, then 5:30 airtime with Jeff Cameron and Tom Lang. So do check us out and check out shop.cummins.com. We're going to make game predictions, us three here on the screen. But first, the remaining staff over at warchant.com broke this game down and gave us their picks.
Florida State making its home debut after that glorious victory down in Orlando against LSU. Obviously, FSU is going to move to 2-0 on the season. The line right now, the last I saw, is 31 points. It's going to be, I think that's probably about right. Look, I think Florida State will be fine at halftime. They'll have a comfortable lead. We'll get to see a lot of the backups, some of the newcomers. I'm really excited to see some of those freshmen get out there in the second half, and they've shown a lot of promise in practice. I think Florida State's going to win this one 42-13. Just misses the cover, probably a backdoor cover for Southern Miss on this one. But Noles will glide comfortably into 2-0 heading into next week.
It should be another fun week for Florida State fans, but a different kind of fun. You're not playing a top 5 team in the country. You're not playing a big neutral site game. But you are playing your first home game inside of Doak Campbell Stadium of the 2023 season, and you're number 4 in the country in the AP poll, number 5 in the coaches poll. So things are really going well for Florida State. They bring in a Southern Miss team who I think will be kind of challenging. It's a team that went to a bowl game last year. They have a lot of Power 5 transfers. They're a legitimate football team. I don't think they're good enough to beat Florida State, but also I'm not sure Florida State's going to cover a spread that's been over 30 points this week. So I think Florida State's going to win the game pretty comfortably. May not look totally crisp. There are a lot of emotions coming after that LSU win. Now you're getting into a stretch here where you have a couple games before that big Clemson game. So I don't think Florida State's going to look quite as good as they did in that second half when they ran off that 31-0 run. But I do think they're going to win convincingly. I'm going to say Florida State wins this game 45-24.
Time for a pick, and I will tell you that it's not going to be a nightmarish Brett Favre flashback Southern Miss contest here for Florida State fans. Florida State keeps it rolling. Overmatched is Southern Miss, and the Noles win and win big. I'll go 56-17. Let's go 56-17, Florida State over Southern Miss.
I do think that Southern Miss will be able to score twice. I mean, you got Frank Gore. They have good receivers. Their quarterback is a Clemson transfer, so this isn't that bad of a team like McNeese State or whoever that UF is playing. Like, this is a fairly good team for the Sun Belt Conference. But I do think, obviously, this Florida State offense is way too overpowered. Their only player on their secondary, as you saw in the video before, was their safety, who's pretty good. But outside of that, they should be able to tear apart this secondary and establish the run game. So my prediction for this game is going to be Florida State. I'll go 65, somewhere in the mid-60s to 14.
Clean sweep last week. We were all right. Pat ourselves on the back. Can we do it again? You heard from the staff. Let's go now to our panel here. Tom Lang, you've been looking at this game about as intently as one can when it is a Sun Belt foe, and you're coming off a huge win against LSU. Seems like things are really lining up for Florida State to have a nice challenge to see if they've made that next step in terms of handling success. How do they handle things Saturday? What's your game prediction for Florida State and Southern Miss, 8:30 ACC Network Saturday in Tallahassee?
It's going to be a late one, and they're happy about it with the coaching staff. The extra half a day to mend some wounds from a physical Sunday night. I think they're going to try and speed the game up a little bit, especially with that first team on the field. Check in, check out, be professional. I think they do hit the 50s in this game. Good Lord, they can do it against LSU. They should be able to do it against Southern Miss. But I think it's 52-13 Noles. And one note on the generators, I heard they power fans. Are Cummins generators powerful enough to power Florida fans? Because Florida fans need a little They need some loving this year. I don't know.
Oh, I like it, T-Lang. Nice.
I mean, it's not biblical, but it's quite powerful.
All right, there's your dad joke of the week. Sorry, everybody.
Yeah, well done.
Corey, 31, I think, is the last time I saw the spread for this game. Not necessarily saying whether or not Florida State will cover or not, but give us your game prediction for Southern Miss and Florida State, please.
Yeah, the number that keeps coming up is 52-17. But like Tom said, I do think Florida State, normally they would want as many possessions as possible in a game like this, because the more plays there are against an inferior opponent, the more chances there are to win the game and win the game going away. But in this instance, on a short week, a really short week, I do think they kind of want to shorten it a little bit and just get out of Dodge, but that lends itself to maybe not scoring, not having as many possessions. And Southern Miss is going to, if they're smart, LSU was not smart. Southern Miss is probably going to try to run the play clock down and not snap it every 15 seconds. So I'm going to steer away from the 52-17, and I'm going to say 41-10 is my prediction. 41-10, which is right on that number on the over/under if you're a gambling person.
I think Florida State will show some mercy. I think the Mike Norvell, Will Hall head coach relationship, I think there'll be respect there to not pour it on too heavily. I'll go 45-7. So I think that falls really right on the cusp almost of what this could work out to being. But I'll go. I
still remember Aslan. I still remember the '89 game with Brett Favre that cost Florida State a national championship. I hope he shows no mercy. I know, guys, that was 34 years ago, and I should probably get over it, but I'm not over it. So I hope they go for the jugular.
No, there's no water under that bridge.
Nope.
Not at all. All right, that's a wrap for us here on the Warchant Report, powered by Cummins. Thanks so much for joining us. You can hang out with us with the pregame show over at Hotel Indigo on Saturday on game day, or even before then, if you're so antsy, you can come out over to the Corner Pocket for a live happy hour with Jeff Cameron and Corey Clark. What time's that going down again, Corey?
5 o'clock. 5 o'clock on Friday. Yep.
It's when a happy hour should start. Thanks again for our staff for submitting their picks and for Tom and Corey for hanging out. I'm Aslan. Thanks again for watching this edition of the Warchant Report, powered by Cummins.